They laughed when I signed the debt assumption papers today. My brother smirked, adjusting his heavy gold Rolex Daytona watch. He genuinely thought I had just inherited the family's garbage. He thought he had won our multi-million-dollar corporate empire. He was already planning which Italian sports car to buy. My parents patted my shoulder, pretending to feel deep sympathy. They handed me a thin folder containing my inheritance. Inside was the deed to an abandoned, bankrupt industrial warehouse. Along with it, a shell company drowning in tax debt. Over $250,000 owed to the IRS. They used the probate court to dump their massive liability, and they gave Liam the $12 million flagship company. I was supposed to be completely crushed by this betrayal. I was supposed to beg them for a small allowance. I was supposed to be the quiet, obedient, failed daughter. But as I looked at the signature on the deed, I noticed a specific corporate seal my grandfather had used. A seal tied to a holding company they completely ignored. They didn't realize what they had actually just given me. They handed me the absolute detonator to their financial ruin. This isn't a story about family forgiveness or moving on. This is how I legally seized every single thing they owned and left my golden child brother working a minimum wage job. My grandfather was a brilliant but incredibly paranoid business magnate. He built a manufacturing empire from scratch over 40 years. But he always knew his own son was entirely incompetent. My father only cared about country clubs and social status. And my mother? She just worshipped the reflection of wealth. So when the old man died, he left a puzzle. He appointed my parents as the executors of his estate. A fatal mistake or a deliberate test of character? They had a legal fiduciary duty to distribute assets fairly, but greed is a poison that blinds people to reality. Liam was always their favorite, loud and arrogant. I was the analyst, the one who read the footnotes. They hated that I asked questions about their offshore accounts. So they conspired to cut me out of the family. The will allowed them to allocate properties as they saw fit. They gave Liam the fully operational factories and cash, millions of dollars in liquid assets, handed over instantly. For me, they dug up a buried LLC named Apex Holdings. It looked terrible on paper, a rusty warehouse and debt. To them, I was just a human trash can for liability. They assumed the IRS would bankrupt me within months. I drove to the warehouse that first night in the rain. It smelled like decay and felt like a prison. Rain leaked through the roof onto the cold concrete floor. I set up a chair and a cheap laptop in the dark. I didn't cry or call them to complain. I started doing what I do best. I followed numbers. The tax debt was real, as the warehouse was indeed worthless. But why did my grandfather keep this shell company alive? He paid the registration fees every year without fail. I spent 2 weeks living on stale coffee and grit. I dug into the archives and hidden corporate registries. I needed to pierce up the corporate veil he had built. I hired Sarah, a ruthless specialist in forensic accounting. We traced the origins of Apex Holdings back decades, and that's when we found the grandfather's ultimate trapdoor. Apex Holdings wasn't just a dumping ground for real estate. It was the intellectual property vault for the entire empire. Every machine Liam's factory used was patented under Apex. The brand name, the formulas, and the exclusive distribution licenses, all legally registered to the company I now owned. My parents were so blinded by the cash and land. They never bothered to check who owned the underlying patents. They handed Liam a car, but they gave me the engine. But before I could strike, I had to secure the weapon. The IRS still held a massive tax lien against me. If they seized the company, my grandfather's trap would vanish. I liquidated my retirement, every penny I had saved. I lived on ramen in that cold, leaking warehouse. I wired the money directly to the tax authorities. The IRS issued a formal release of lien certificate. Apex Holdings was mine, free and clear of all debts. Meanwhile, Liam was acting exactly as predicted. He was heavily over-leveraging to fund his lavish lifestyle. He took out a loan using company collateral as bait. He bought a yacht and a beachfront mansion instantly. My parents cheered him on, blind to the disaster. They were standing on a trapdoor. I held the lever. I spent a week drafting the most aggressive documents. I hired a cutthroat attorney who specialized in IP litigation. We drafted a cease and desist for trademark infringement. We added an invoice for 8 months of unpaid royalties. The total bill was $6 million due immediately, plus a new agreement at a 400% premium. I printed the documents on heavy watermarked legal paper. I sent them via certified mail with a tracker. I wanted a signature, proving Liam received the order. The confirmation arrived on my phone 2 ngē later. I waited in the warehouse, watching the rain hit glass. An hour later, my phone lit up with Mother's call. I let it ring. Then the angry texts started. Liam called me a pathetic and delusional loser. My father threatened to sue for harassment and extortion. They didn't consult lawyers or check the patent registry. They simply laughed and threw the order in the trash. They ignored a federal claim, which is financial suicide. The law gave them exactly 30 days to respond. I used those days to map out their cash flow, every supplier they paid, and every corporate bank account. On day 31, at 9 in the morning, I struck. I didn't call them. I just nodded to my attorney. We filed a lawsuit for gross intellectual property infringement. Simultaneously, we hit the probate court with a petition. We charged them with a breach of fiduciary duty. We presented the patents directly to the federal judge. The judge reviewed the signatures and the structure. The ruling was instantaneous. An ex parte injunction was granted. The court issued a freeze on all of Liam's accounts. This wasn't just a lawsuit, it was an asset seizure. By noon, Liam's cards started declining at steakhouse tables. By 2 o'clock, Abby Payroll realized they had no funds. The bank locked everything. The cash flow was severed. The manufacturing engine had just run out of gas, and I was the only one holding the keys to the pump. My phone started ringing. This time, Liam was begging. He needed the freeze lifted just to pay his workers. My parents drove straight to my rusted warehouse. They stepped in the mud, ruining their Italian leather shoes. They found me reviewing their financial autopsy. They looked pale, shaking, and utterly terrified. My mother tried to smile with that fake sympathetic tone. She called it a misunderstanding between a loving family. My father demanded I drop the suit for the legacy. He promised me a job if I surrendered the patents. I didn't say a word. I didn't raise my voice. I calmly slid a notice of liquidation across the desk. I told them I wouldn't stop until they were dismantled. The injunction had already triggered the default loan clauses. The banks immediately demanded their millions of dollars back. Liam couldn't pay. His yacht was seized that afternoon. His cars were loaded onto trucks in front of neighbors. The factory doors remained chained shut by marshals. 6 months later, Liam filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The empire went to a public federal auction. The goal was to pay the debts they owed to me. I sat in the back row, holding the bidding paddle. Nobody wanted to buy a factory without its patents. I raised my paddle and bought it for pennies. I used the money they legally owed me as credit. The gavel slammed down. The empire was officially mine. I didn't fire Liam. His ego couldn't handle the shame. Today he works at a cheap discount retail store. My parents rent a cramped apartment in the city. They no longer attend country club dinners or parties. And me? I integrated Apex back into the main company. I sit in the chair. They tried so hard to steal. They gave me Rust, and I built the Blade. A lot of you think this story is fiction. You think loopholes only exist in the movies, but forensic accounting is much darker and simpler. Most wealthy families separate IP from their operations. The operating company takes on all the massive liabilities, but the holding company sits quietly in the dark shadows. It legally owns the patents and the proprietary formulas. Liam's company had to pay me just to exist. My parents were blinded by the immediate cash flow. They assumed the warehouse was a punishment for me. Now let's talk about Liam's dirty secret. He wasn't just incompetent, he was committing fraud. He had been embezzling from the employee pension fund. He stole retirement money to buy his sports cars. It was a textbook case of fiduciary malpractice. When the judge saw the fraud, reorganization was denied. The court ordered a forced total liquidation instead. My parents screamed that I was destroying their son, but I actually saved him from a federal prison. By forcing the bankruptcy, the embezzlement was buried deep. If your family treats you like a liability, stop crying about it. Stop complaining that the game is rigged. The game of wealth is never fair for anyone. You must learn to read the complex hidden rules. Learn to read a balance sheet and contracts, because the details they hide in the fine print will be the tools you use for their downfall. I built a fortress, an asset protection trust. If you place assets there, you no longer own them. And if you don't own them, lawyers can't touch them. They can sue for billions and walk away empty-handed. Success is the most brutal revenge possible. Every day, they see my name on the buildings. Every day, they hear about my massive donations. They thought they were burying me, but I was a seed. I donated the mansion to a home for children. I turned a monument to greed into something beautiful. They still haven't apologized. Toxic people never do. They believe they are victims of a cosmic injustice, but they violated trust for a flashy apartment. Now they live with the consequences of that choice. If you want to win, you must own the engine. Never let them rush you into signing anything, because knowledge is the only true currency today. I sit in this office, overseeing a global empire. The legacy is secured. The traitors are gone. If you enjoyed this breakdown of the Apex takeover, hit the subscribe button for more financial revenge. Leave a comment. What would you do in my position? I read everyone, because knowledge is power. I'll see you in the next one, Mastermind. Until then, remember to own the shovel.